So, if you're joining us today, chances are you've reached a point where you're thinking not just about your own retirement, but also about how to help your family while you're still here and leave a meaningful legacy after you're gone. You're in the right place. Our host today is someone who spent more than 35 years helping families, and especially grandparents, protect and grow their wealth with smart, savvy tax planning. James Lang is a CPA, an estate attorney, and a nationally recognized expert on Roth IRAs, retirement plan distributions, and holistic tax and estate planning strategies. Jim's retirement planning techniques have been featured in the Wall Street Journal 37 times. He's the author of 10 best-selling financial books, including Retire Secure, and is a paid contributor to Forbes.com, where he's published more than 20 articles on the strategies that he'll be covering today. His work is endorsed by some of the country's top experts, including Charles Schwab, Burton Malkiel, Ed Slott, Larry Kotlikoff, and many others. What sets Jim apart truly is his ability to take complex tax law and turn it into clear, actionable strategies. He published the first peer-reviewed article on Roth IRAs in 1998, predicted the end of the stretch IRA years before Congress passed the Secure Act, and recently implemented a strategy for his own family that, given reasonable assumptions, will save over $1.1 million in taxes over his daughter's lifetime. That strategy was featured in the Wall Street Journal this past December and in a detailed article that Jim authored last month for Forbes.com. Through his interrelated firms, including a CPA firm that is currently in the process of preparing more than 750 tax returns, and a registered investment advisory firm that helps manage and plan for nearly $1 billion in assets under management, Jim and our team have helped hundreds of families build personalized financial master plans. Today's session is packed with strategies that grandparents can use to spend confidently, gift more strategically, and leave a tax-savvy legacy. And the best part is that you'll be able to apply and benefit from what you learned today, whether you decide to work with us or not. So please join me in welcoming Jim Lang.
Thank you, Erica. I'm so excited to be here because this is one of my favorite topics that, frankly, I have not covered for 35 years. I've really concentrated on it just the last couple years, and it is, in my opinion, very underrated in terms of how often it is covered and how important it is. And then, even when it is covered, they get it wrong, or I should say, they present outdated information. And I'm going to try to give you the best updated information. And I think one of the reasons this is so important to me is because it has such an impact on your lifestyle. And so for literally close to 40 years, I have been trying to encourage people to spend more than they can, or at the very least, not worry about running out of money. And I didn't have as much great quantitative analysis to prove to people as I do now. So that's what we're going to get into today. And we're going to talk about what is the safe withdrawal rate. And we're going to learn how it works. We're going to learn what it is. And we're going to study some of the nuances of the top safe withdrawal expert in the world, Bill Bengen, who over 30 years ago wrote like the preeminent paper, the most quoted paper ever on safe withdrawal rate. And then we're going to cover not only his original work, but more importantly, his updated work and what that means to you and for your lifestyle. The other thing that he did, which is really brand new, his book just came out, I think a year ago. And when I read it, I got so excited, and I knew immediately that I wanted to present this information. And luckily, I knew Bill because I was actually on the safe withdrawal issue, I think 10 years ago when he was on my radio show, before he had this updated information. And now he included something that will help people who might not have a 30-year time horizon. They might have a 10-year time horizon, a 20-year time horizon. And we're going to cover that, and we're going to cover how you can determine your own time horizon, and then after you determine your own time horizon, how to apply the updated safe withdrawal rate to your own personal time horizon. And then we're going to try to talk about the market, the assumptions that were used. I'm not going to try to give you the latest in the market analysis, but rather the big picture for the market. All right, so what we're going to do, and let's see, I'm having a minor technical issue. All right, so I'm going to do this from memory. Eric, I'm going to ask you to give me either forward the slides or let me forward the slides. So we're going to talk about not just the pure safe withdrawal rate, but how much money you can spend taking other factors into account. Things like Social Security, things like the equity in your home. The equity in your home actually has a significant impact on how much money you can safely spend, whether you ever borrow it or whether you ever get a reverse mortgage. And not that I'm pushing these areas, but if you have, for example, $1 million home, that can give you a lot of extra money, maybe $30,000 a year over and above what you thought you could have spent. So we're going to be putting these into effect. And one of the reasons I have, so I've been doing, most of my clients are pretty fiscally conservative, and I think most of you are also. And with one exception, I've never had a client die broke. And the exception was he came in very broke, very ill, and died within a year or two. But other than that, most of my clients are dying or frankly are preparing to die with way bigger portfolios than they ever would need. And that's not necessarily the smartest strategy in the world. And even if you don't, I'm not saying I'm not going to get you to fly first class anyway. But if maybe I can move you a little bit, maybe towards spending money on family vacations, maybe spending a little bit more money on taking care of your health, maybe spending a little bit more money on getting services that can be provided for you could significantly impact the quality of your life. That's what I want to do. And then the other thing that we're going to try to do is we're going to try to clarify the issue of safe withdrawal rate. Instead of doing mumbo jumbo, we're going to actually have some math, and we're going to help you calculate how much money you can safely spend, which I'm going to guess is way more than you are currently spending. And I don't even expect you to come up to the number that we're going to use, even though it's a very conservative number. But what I am hoping is two possible results. One, you actually will spend some more, or two, at least you won't worry about running out of money as much as you have. Okay, so what is the safe withdrawal rate? It is a measurement of how much money you can safely withdraw from your portfolio without running out of money. All right, and it's measured as a percent of your portfolio. And you might have heard, oh, I can afford to spend 4% of my portfolio. So that means, let's say you have $1 million in your portfolio. You say, okay, I can afford to withdraw $40,000 from my portfolio. And then next year, I can spend $40,000 plus inflation. But wait, Jim, what if the market went down? Don't you have to adjust your safe withdrawal rate? No, no, no. You can actually, the way the safe withdrawal rate works and the way Bill Bengen set it up, and by the way, we have 30 years of experience, and again, he's the most quoted expert on safe withdrawal rate in the world. You can continue adding inflation to the original amount that, let's say, were the date of retirement, and you will still never run out of money. Now, his original analysis was for a 30-year time horizon, which presumably was a conservative estimate, and he came up with the number 4%. But in his recent work, he said, no, you could actually spend up to 4.7% in the first year of retirement. So he's giving us an extra $7,000. And again, we can adjust this for inflation every year from retirement until the end. So this is a great thing, and a lot of people don't really get this. So first, we're going to start with his old analysis, 4% over 30 years, and then which can be adjusted annually for inflation. And then he's saying, no, we can now do 4.7%. All right, excuse me for 1 second. All right. He is, again, the most widely cited expert in the history of retirement planning, by the way, on any topic. Nobody has been cited more than Bill Bengen on any financial topic. He is the first to rigorously apply how much retirees can safely spend from their portfolio. And he's just given so much to the profession. We're so grateful. And I was lucky to meet him and interview him more than 10 years ago. And I was more excited about his work than the vast majority of people. And we have been in touch. We actually have some video of him coming up on a webinar where he appeared with me. And this is the real thing. And one of the issues is retirees misapply the safe withdrawal rate, or they ignore it completely. So why don't we hear directly from Bill on some of the biggest mistakes he makes, and something that he actually surprised me when he did this video. So if we could have the video, I would appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to Erica to play the video.
Let me ask you another question. What are some of the common mistakes that you see people make when applying the safe withdrawal concept?
Yeah, I think the first one is they hear the number 4% and they think that means 4% of your portfolio balance each year. It doesn't, as we explained earlier. It's 4% the first year, then throw the 4% away and just give yourself a costing of living increase, as with Social Security. That's probably the greatest source of misconception.
All right, so I'm going to restate what I think is your answer, because I think it is so important. So basically, let's just say for discussion's sake, you retire at $1 million, 30 years, 4.7, $47,000 less the taxes. Let's say that the market does very well, and that a year later, the market did, let's just say 10%, and now you're at 1.1 million. You're still doing the 4.7% of the million, not of the 1.1 million. Is that right?
Yeah, you're not changing, because each successive year, it doesn't involve the portfolio value. The second year on just means adding a dollar amount to the withdrawal. So you're not changing anything about the original assumptions.
All right, so let's go the other way. Let's say that we have a loss. So this is going to be the tougher question. And let's make it even worse. Let's assume you start at $1 million, you take out 4.7, and then, whether it's COVID or whatever it is, you have a drop of 20%. Okay? So now, instead of having $1 million, you're at 800,000. Are you saying you can still take out 4% of the million plus inflation?
Yeah, that's correct. The calculations I do include the possibility of significant bear markets in retirement, which can reduce withdrawal rates. So there's no need to take action, because the stock market usually recovers strongly, and you'll return to plan.
All right. Does everybody in the room understand this? Because I think he has pointed out the exact mistake that so many people make. Do you get that? If the market goes down, you can still take out your 4.7 plus inflation. Well, so let me ask you this. Let's say that you were retiring today, and let's say that you had a $1 million portfolio. Would you actually do what you are recommending, or would you be more conservative or more aggressive? So what would you be doing if you were a retiree? And again, we'll use your 5-year buffer, thinking a 25-year portfolio, adding 5 years on, coming up with 4.7. Is that what you would do, or would you do something different?
Yeah, I would. If I was retiring today, I would be probably looking at something closer to 5.5%. because I don't think we face the dire circumstances that the 1968 retiree fixed. And to that extent, I do eat my own cookie. When I retired 12 years ago, my number was 4.5%, not 4.7, and that's what I started with. And of course, the stock market done so well since then, I was actually able to increase my withdrawals.
Oh, wait, that sounds like you're not doing what you said you were going to do. Because you just said you were going to increase your withdrawals if the market
Right.
went up.
Well, if it goes up consistently, this is the experience that people in the early 1980s had. They came into a market which was very cheap and had certain withdrawal rates, but because of the huge bull market, the 18 years that followed that nobody expected, they were able to increase their withdrawal rate significantly later in life. Uh, so it's not completely independent of what the stock market does, but if the stock market looks like it's done very well, much better than expected for a much longer period of time than expected, you probably are right considering an increase in withdrawal rates.
One of the things that I want to do is I tried to cover what I thought was important. And by the way, you did a great job because I went way off script a number of times. I should say I don't like to zing people, so I sent Bill a set of questions, said, hey, is it okay? But as he gave answers, I changed the script quite a bit. Is there something that I didn't say or didn't ask that you want to tell this group of very interested listeners?
I think my primary message there would be to regard planning for retirement income as basically a process involving a number of steps. You can't skip steps. For example, in my book, I begin with what I call the 8 elements, which you can use to customize your plan. That includes asset allocation, the length of your withdrawals, the type of account. And then to get to your number, which is the last part of the puzzle, you have to take inflation and stock market valuation into account as they are when you retire. And those factors together determine what your withdrawal rate will be.
All right, well, this has been wonderful.
So you heard it directly from Bill, and he actually surprised me when he said, no, you could actually take out more than 4.7%. But I know my listeners and viewers are conservative, so I'm not going to push that point too much. But I guess my point is that historically 4%, then he changes to 4.7%, and that's his rule based on his historical analysis. And now he's saying, well, maybe you can take even a higher amount if the stock market does well, like it did. But his original analysis looked at the worst case market scenario. And then he created a 30-year baseline, and he looked at every single year in recorded US history and said, okay, what was the worst year to retire in terms of running out of money using whatever, this is before he came up with it. And it turned out that if you retired on October 1, 1968, that was the worst retirement start date that you could have. Why? Because you had a combination of a sharp downturn and you had followed that sharp downturn by high inflation. And remember, we're basing it on the market rate or the percentage. Again, we're going to start with 4.7% times the current value of your portfolio. And then we're going to increase that withdrawal by inflation. So if you have high inflation, you're taking out even more. So of all the recorded dates in US history, October 1, 1968 was the worst. And even then, that's how he got to the 4.7% for 30 years. But originally, he actually said 4%. Well, now he's coming out and saying 4.7%. Well, that's a big, big difference. Why did he do that? Did the U.S. economy, is he taking that into consideration? Is he taking into consideration that we have had 18 great years in the big scheme of things in the market? No, the thing that he is changing, which to me is very reassuring, he's not saying, okay, we're going we're going to change the rate based on market conditions. What he did is he is using a more realistic assumption for your portfolio. So what he did originally is he said, okay, let's say that people are 50-50, 50% large US companies, 50%, let's say, treasuries. So 50% stock, not a well-diversified portfolio, but large US companies, and 50% treasuries. And that's how he came to the 50-50 portfolio, and that was his analysis. But then he said, wait, this is much more recently. That's not the way people invest anymore. First of all, most people have more money in the stock market than they do in fixed income. Then the other thing is they don't have just large US companies. They have small companies. They have mid-sized companies. They have value. They have growth. They have international. So why don't we assume a well-diversified portfolio, bump it up to 55%, so he's still not being very aggressive, 40% bonds, and well, I guess it has to be 10% cash because it's not adding up. But anyway, using that analysis, and then he went back and he redid his numbers and he came up with 4.7. And if you think about it, it's a 7, or even if you don't think about it, because I'm going to show it to you, it's a 17.5% raise in the portfolio's safe withdrawals. So let's say, for example, that you had a $1 million portfolio, that you were working on a $40,000 4% safe withdrawal assumption, and now you have a $47,000, so you have an extra $7,000, so that's a $7,000 raise, and you divide that by the amount of money that you can withdraw, which is 40,000, and you don't get, let's say 0.7%, you get 17.5%. This is life-changing, and that's one of the reasons why I got so excited about this material, because it can have such a material impact on your lifestyle. And before I actually go into the next area, which is time horizons, I thought I would just check in quickly with Erica to see if there's a question on this, because to me, this is so important that you're actually changing the amount that you're withdrawing by inflation every year and not adjusting every year when the market goes up or down. And even though it's not officially in his research, Bill's saying, hey, the market is better than it was, so you can actually go better than the historical analysis. But Erica, why don't we take a question or two, because this is probably one of the most, well, it's probably going to be the most important thing I said today, which is not 4.7, and based on, and then take a raise with inflation every year. By the way, I'm very excited about the next part too, time horizons, but I want to make sure that this is right. And by the way, I just finished a 3-day workshop on AI, and I was kind of saying, oh, I need a break at certain points. So I actually reduced the scope a little bit of what we're doing today to allow more time for questions and to not try to jam in so much information so quickly. But Erica, do we have any questions so far?
We do have a few questions, but not very many specifically about this safe withdrawal rate. We did have one question that you, I believe, kind of already addressed that came in early, which was just, Jim, I've been using the 4% rule for years. Can you explain why Bengen increased to 4.7 and whether that means I should be spending more than I currently am? But rather than answering that question, that actually made me think of a good question now, which is, so Jim, if I'm somebody who's been retired for a number of years, say 5 or 10, and I've been using either the 4% rate or some sort of customized rate that my financial planner helped me come up with, or my CPA, or some combination of both. And now I see, well, that Bill Bengen, the originator of the 4% rule, he has increased his recommendation from 4 to 4.7. How would I apply that? It seems like it would be a nuanced application, because the way that the 4% withdrawal rate or any of these withdrawal rate schemes works, right, is that you get a percentage and then that percentage is a number of it's all based on how much you had on day one. And that number doesn't change. It only increases for inflation. So how would you adjust if you've already been withdrawing?
Well, so if I could restate the question, how much money can you withdraw if you've been doing 4% all along? And do I have to use that historic number? Well, in terms of the absolute methodology, yes, that's what you should use. But then Bill himself said, hey, the market's been doing so well, we can maybe up that. Here's two other things. One, if you were doing 4% for, let's say, 10 years, two things have happened. Number one, you're 10 years older. So now instead of having, say, a 30-year retirement, you might only have a 20-year retirement, which is going to work very nicely with the next topic. But the other thing is, Bill is saying, hey, let's be a little bit realistic. If the market went way up, you can have more. So let me tell you what we do in practice, although it's not 100% what Bill, and by the way, we have multiple ways. Bill's, I believe, is the most famous, the most well-known. We actually, when we do this in practice, we actually have several methods that we actually use. But one of the things is we might actually take a look at, well, what is the value today? And then look at 4.7% of that. Now that's, again, not theoretically Bill's original intent, but even Bill said, hey, you can go higher. But here, let me talk about, let's say, something that is part of the new analysis and something that we can quantify, which is Bill's analysis was really based on a 30-year retirement. All right. So you didn't hear, well, and by the way, for years, when I was doing reviews for our clients, for years, I practically always started with safe withdrawal rate because to me, that was so important. Not that Roth IRA conversions and estate planning and everything else I do is not important, but it was constantly to remind people. So I had, let's say, some now dated research, and I actually used other things. I used Bill Bengen and other areas. But one of the things that I did, and I didn't have great proof of this, was, okay, if you're 75 years old, you probably don't have a 30-year life expectancy. If you are older, if you have a medical condition, obviously, if you are married, we typically want to take both life expectancies into account because we want to provide for not only you, but also for the survivor. And then one of the things that was so exciting for me when Bill came out with his new book is he said, hey, I had to go back, recognize that people, have a different time horizon other than 30 years, or time has gone by and they no longer have a 30-year life expectancy. How about if I do the analysis going back for different life expectancies, 15 years, 20 years? And then if you go the other way, you believe in some of the longevity science. Hey, what if I live 35 years? What if I live 40 years? Or something I'm very passionate about now, if you have a child with a disability and you want the money to last for that child's life, maybe 50 years. So what he did is he said, okay, we're going to redo the analysis for each year. Starting with 3 years, which is obviously you could take out a heck of a lot more if you only have a 3-year life expectancy, or 50 years. And here's the other thing that he said, which I think is good because I always want to be conservative. All right. So he said, start with your life expectancy. And then if you're married, then the joint life expectancy. All right. And then he's saying add a buffer on top of it. So let's say you're 70 years old, you figure you're going to live 15 years, and maybe you and your spouse will live 20 years. Should you use 20 years? No. Let's think, like I always tell clients, what's the most how long is the most long you are likely to live? Oh, gee, Jim, I'm 70 now. Let's do 90. Then I say, no, let's do 95 because I want to be very, very conservative. I never ever want you to run out of money or even worry about running out of money. So here's what he did. He did this chart that said, okay, we're going to go with that more conservative number. So let's say it's 15 years. We're going to make it 20 years. Then he did a chart, and which I kind of redid to make the graphics better. And now he's using it, which is great. And then you take the number on the chart, multiply it times your portfolio, and you get your safe withdrawal rate. And here's the chart. And this to me this was, in addition from going to 4 to 4.7, this chart is huge because what it shows is no matter what your time horizon is, you can just go to the chart, find your time horizon, and then he has the safe withdrawal rate based on this. Now, here's a couple things that to me are really interesting. If you look at the chart here and you see, okay, well, gee, for a 3-year time horizon, I can take up to 30%. And that makes sense because you only need the money for 3 years, even if the market goes down. And again, he's using the worst 3 years of recorded US history. You could still take out 30%. And then, as you would expect, it goes down. But notice how it starts leveling off. So there isn't a huge difference, say, between age or 15 years and then 30 years. And by the way, notice that the 30 years is, and I've been rounding off to 3.7, it's actually 4.676. But you'll notice if you go out to say 50 years, it's still above 4%. So this is really important to me, which is, the safe withdrawal rate goes down sharply at first, but then it kind of levels out. All right, so let's do an example. Let's say you say, hey, Jim, I don't have 30 years left. I have 15 years, and my wife and I have 15 years, and even that's pushing it. So I'm going to push it a little bit more. And so, I'm going to go to a 20-year life expectancy. And then I'm going to do a 5-year buffer. So now we're at 25 years. All right. And if you go back to the chart and you find 25 years, you see 4.962%. Let's round that up to 5%. Times a million is $50,000. Okay. So, and again, you were probably using 4%. So that was $40,000. So this is a substantial raise, even more than the 17%, 17.5% that we showed before. Again, Bill is building in safely. He's not doing this blindly. It is based on historical. It's being very conservative. And he's not trying to squeeze out the last dollar. He's using the most conservative assumptions possible, which is what I like to do because nobody wants to even face the risk of running out of money. But I think that this is really potentially life-changing information, which is so exciting. All right, now I have to be the conservative fuddy-duddy. No system is immune to risk. All right. You could have a historically unprecedented sequence of poor returns, high inflation, and that potentially could disrupt even the most robust model. And by the way, there are other safe withdrawal models, and Bill's the first guy to talk about it. In fact, interestingly, he covers other safe withdrawal models in his book. But again, his book and his method is by far the most quoted, the most accepted, and the fact that he updated it to me is just enormous. And one of the reasons that I want to go back and say, look at a historical perspective is because in practice, people freak out when the market goes down. When the market went down with COVID, all of a sudden people were much, much more conservative. Even right now, with Iran and some of the let's say instability of the stock market. People are saying, oh, I have to be more conservative. But what I'm saying is don't let these headlines hijack your retirement security. You should be able to live well within your means, probably spending a lot more money than you are. And I'm not saying to go, I get a lot of, oh, gee, what am I going to spend it on? I'm not saying to go out and waste your money. I'm not saying to go out and get a new Cadillac. I'm not even saying to fly first class, even if you could afford it. But I am saying maybe gift a little bit more money, spend some more money for services to make your life a little bit easier. Spend some money on your health care. You people who have heard this from me for years. I'm a big fan of concierge medicine. I don't want you to skimp on the important things. And by the way, it'd be interesting if you asked your kids, which one would you rather me do? Would you rather me spend more money for myself and my and mom's health care, or would you rather me be more conservative so I can leave you more money? Every kid, well, maybe not every kid, but hopefully 98 out of 100 is no, no, mom and dad, we want you to be happy. You go spend whatever you want to do. And if there's something left, that's great. So this is, and by the way, I told that to my mother all the time. I said, you go out and spend as much as you want. You'll never run out of money. Even if you do, we'll take care of you. And she still was relatively frugal because that's the way she grew up and that's the way she was. And she lived till 95, probably longer than she expected, but she still was in very good shape. And for grandparents, all right, staying the course protects not just your retirement income, but it is going to preserve your ability to gift strategically. So when I say spend, gifting, let's say for our purposes, is a form of spending. All right. So if you add your Social Security and maybe some of the other things that we're going to talk about, you can actually, quote, spend more. And it's such a wonderful thing to help your family out while they are younger and you are still around to appreciate it. So, true story, facts change to preserve confidentiality. Two clients in a very similar position, one, way more money than they were ever going to spend. One was relatively frugal about gifting, and their child, who was doing something very socially worthwhile, really lived, well, a little bit above the poverty level, but not a lot. And then inherited a ton of money when she was close to 70. Not a good plan. The other client, with roughly the same amount of money, was very generous with gifting. Their son was able to live in a nice area. The kids were able to attend a good school because they were in this nice area. The money was put away for the grandkids' education. And so when they died, they inherited a little bit less, but they had this wonderful lifestyle all along. So this really does matter. And one of the things that we like to do is to help people with this, as well as many other areas, Roth IRA conversions, estate planning, which we're going to cover later on today. But if you know that you are interested in getting some help and talking with me and the people on my team, if you can click in the link in the chat box below to request a Retire Secure consultation. Justin will give you a call. You have to qualify. And the main qualification for me, by the way, is whether we think we can help you a lot. And by the way, just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean that you have wonderful facts, that is FACTS, that we can help you a lot, because certain people are maybe set up relatively well, or their fact pattern is such that we can't do a lot for them. And frankly, we are in the good position that we can work with people who we think we can help a lot, which is much more exciting to me. In fact, the other number crunchers say, "Hey, Jim, these folks aren't a great candidate," not because they might have $5 million, but the nature of their assets, the nature of their plan is that we can't help them all that much. To me, a very big criteria is, can we help? So if you are interested in the consultation, and you want to, in effect, go to the front of the line, Justin, I'll ask you to put that up, and then we're going to continue on with this webinar. But before we go on, so we've heard now about the classic rule, and then we actually added on the issue of the different number of years for time horizon. Erica, how about do we have any questions on that?
We do.
Before we go on?
Actually, I was just messaging with Justin and Eric about this because we got a great question from Nancy that I think also gives us an opportunity to tell people about a tool that we can give them a URL at the end of the webinar so they can actually give it a spin themselves. But Nancy said, please walk through an example that covers several years. I start out with 40,000 withdrawal, then 1 year of inflation is 2%, then maybe another year it's 3. Like, please walk through how that would work. So we actually developed, using, with Bill's permission, of course, and thank you, Bill, a calculator that uses the underlying data that feeds the analysis that he did for that worst case scenario retirement. And we put the calculator up on our site so you can test it using all kinds of different, you can pick your inflation, basically your annual inflation, and then it gives you a chart and it gives you the number of, and it's anywhere from 3 to 50 years. And at the end of the webinar, Justin is going to throw the URL for that into the chat so that you can play with it at lunch. But it's really exciting. So we also got, and thank you everybody for putting more of your questions about this specific topic into the Q&A. And please keep them coming. So one quick question that I think you can address now. Mini asked, is the withdrawal rate pre-tax?
Yes, it is. So if we're going to take, just to simplify, 30 years, $1 million, 30 years, 4.7%, you get $47,000. That means that you have to pay, you're going to have, depending on whether the income is coming from an IRA or after tax or whatever source it is, you are going to have to pay taxes. So just to keep the math easy, let's say that triggers a $7,000 tax. Then you have $40,000 to spend after tax, in addition to Social Security and some of the things that I'm going to be getting to now. But that is a good point. I know I have that written in the literature. And by the way, the other thing that I will mention, because you threw me off guard, what I thought you were going to talk about was that mini website that we set up that has all those wonderful resources, that has the safe withdrawal card, that has some of the articles that we have coming up.
Jim, that is actually the website I was talking about. It just also happens to feature that calculator. So on top of being able to play with the calculator, people can also download the safe withdrawal rate planning card, the article that you wrote for Forbes.com about Bill's update to his safe withdrawal rate recommendations. All of that can be found on that site. And Justin will give everyone the URL for that at the end of the session.
Okay. Yeah. And by the way, that was, to me, when I got this new information, it blew me away. And one of the great things about being a contributor to Forbes.com is anytime I get an idea that I want to write about, they'll publish anything that I write at this point. And how many have I done? 15 or 20 or
more than 20, actually. I said that in my introduction this morning. So.
Oh, okay. All right. And then I'm continuing to do this. Which is really exciting, and it's satisfying for me to get my message out to the world and having an authoritative source back it up. But anyway, the safe withdrawal rate, it really is important, but it's really just one piece of the retirement income puzzle. So, and again, I'm having minor problems going ahead. But, oh, there we go. All right. So the other thing that you can take advantage of is what your Social Security is. All right. So I'm going to do a couple things with Social Security. There's two different, well, there's a whole bunch of different ways to look at it, but one that, so for years, in fact, I used to do dedicated Social Security workshops. Okay, here's the maximum strategy. Here's the way to get the very most out of it. And the conclusion I usually came to for most couples was I wanted the earner with the strongest earnings record to wait until age 70 before they took Social Security. All right. And let's just say, for discussion's sake, that you run the numbers and you look and you see that and you say, okay, if I wait until age 70, let's just say, for discussion's sake, it is $40,000. All right. And let's just say, for discussion's sake, you're 67 now. And let's keep it real simple. You have $1 million portfolio, and your Social Security is going to be $40,000, but not until you reach age 70. Does that mean that you can take out $47,000 now? That is the 4.7% times the million. Then that number keeps going up with inflation. And then when you hit 70, well, all of a sudden you can give yourself a $40,000 raise. No, that doesn't really make sense. That really doesn't, because you've kind of deprived yourself of 3 years of potential spending more because you're doing the smart thing by waiting. So what you can do is I'm saying you can spend as if you were taking Social Security now. Oh, gee, Jim, but if I do that, I'm going to have to eat into my IRA because I've already spent all my after-tax dollars. That's okay. I would still rather you wait until age 70, and we'll go through a little bit of that math, to give you a higher income now that you're not going to run out of money. And I'm not really interested in you. Most of my clients have had deferred gratification their whole life. They've been working their what's off, building, saving, attending these workshops for, that I give and others that give, and they maximize their Roth IRAs and they maximize their estate planning. And it's for, later. Well, maybe now, spending more now. I still want you to hold off until age 70 before your Social Security. But my point is that you can spend as if you were taking the Social Security now. If you want to be a little bit conservative, say, oh, okay, my Social Security is slated to be $40,000. If I took it now, I didn't work this out, but let's say it's $36,000, although actually the way it works, by the way, is between retirement age, which is depending on what year you're born, maybe 66 or 67, between that and age 70, you actually get an 8% raise for every year that you wait. So it really is important that you get this right, and which is why, and the break even is somewhere around age 84. But why I want you to wait, but I don't want you to wait to spend the money. Okay, that's really important. If you have a pension, take that into consideration. All right. There are fewer and fewer pensions out there, but you shouldn't ignore that. Now, by the way, you might not want to take the full amount into account. So let's say use the $40,000 number. Let's say that you're on a fixed pension. That is, you're going to get $40,000 a year, not adjusted for inflation every year. Can you actually spend that same 40,000 and then keep increasing that? Well, the answer is no, because the 40,000 is going to be fixed. So I wouldn't say, oh, okay, it's okay to add the full 40,000. It would be a reduced amount. And depending on your age and your life expectancy, the amount that is reduced can be taken into account, but you certainly can. If you have other kinds of income, rental income, real estate income, and the other thing is maybe you're still working a little bit. If you're working full time, well, that's a whole other different calculation. But by the way, we can do projections of, okay, how long are you going to work? How much are you going to make? How much are you going to save? Okay, how much money can you actually safely spend now doing those types of projections? And we do that kind of work all the time. But I do find that a bunch of people they get involved a little bit and they maybe work part-time or um, they do a little consulting or whatever it is. Well, that can certainly be added, but we don't want to necessarily add that full amount because you might not be doing that, for the rest of your life. And I am not trying to get you to spend the highest amount one year and then the next year be really conservative. And then the market goes up and you could spend. I'm actually looking for a higher in general amount that you can spend, but that you could sustain that your entire life. And by the way, if you are willing to cut your expenses, if there is, let's say, a big downturn in the market or if there is a big higher inflation, then there's a whole other set of numbers that you can use, which are even higher. So let's say that you say, well, Jim, let's say the 4.7, that's okay. But if it came to shove, I could cut out this expense, I could cut out that expense. Is there anything that I can do now? Well, the answer is, and this is a whole other topic, but the answer is then yes, if you're willing to cut back, either because the market goes down or a big inflation or something happens in your family, then you could actually spend more money now. And of course, we want to get the estate planning strategies right and to protect and transfer wealth to grandchildren. In fact, I didn't talk a lot about grandparents in this particular session because I don't want to pretend, oh, well, it's much, much different if you have a grandchild than if you don't. But it is somewhat different because it's a little bit more of let's say, a long term. And one of the things that I'm very interested in is if not spending, meaning going out and buying a Cadillac, it is experiences. And for those of you who have been following me, you know that I am a big fan of spending my clients' money on family experiences like family vacations. And I think in terms of how I have actually influenced people, in terms of behavioral change, in terms of what they are doing, I can't tell you how many clients I have told me, oh, Jim, thank you so much for that information and that recommendation to take my family on a vacation every year. It has been so meaningful for us. And as many of you know, that was not my idea. That was my father-in-law's idea, who sponsored a family vacation for at least the last 30 years. We're talking about 35 combination of children, spouses of children, grandchildren, now spouses of grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. And he actually died last year in December of 2025 at age 101. But boy, what a enormous legacy of getting this entire family together every year. And speaking personally for my daughter, she is part of, and she has a disability, and frankly, many of her friends deserted her, but she has this clan. She is part of a clan of her family that loves her, who has seen her every year from the time she was born until now, and that continues to see her every year. And I can't tell you how much that has meant for her, for us, and again, you can do some of the same things for your family. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of these things. I didn't even mention home equity and annuitization. All right. So delaying your Social Security, as I mentioned, you get an 8% raise for every year that you wait between full retirement and age 70. And the other thing about Social Security is if you are married, subject to pretty rare exceptions that I'm not going to get into, after one of you die, the survivor gets the higher of the two. So even if you're 70 years old and you are terminally ill, or I'm sorry, let's say you're 67 years old, you're terminally ill, nobody expects you to live past a year, but your spouse is very happy. I still want you to hold off on your Social Security to get that raise so then your spouse can enjoy the higher amount. All right. Um, but and the break even is somewhere around age 84. If you said, okay, when I say break even, I'm talking about, well, what if you took, people say, well, invest the money that you now that you, let's say, would have received for Social Security, and when does the and you're obviously starting with a lower amount because you're not collecting Social Security. When is that quote break even? Well, it is actually at age 84, but if that's either spouse survives till age 84. But if we're being conservative, which is going to be my theme consistently, well, what happens if one of you lives longer than age 84? The goal is not to die with the most. The goal is to make sure that you and your spouse are safe, as well as gifting, etc. So delaying is a wonderful thing, but that doesn't mean that you can't spend some of the money that you don't have, which is what my wife says I've been doing all along. Because I don't want you to reduce your lifestyle while you are waiting to do the right thing. And by the way, I would say the same thing for Roth conversions. You know, if you the idea of doing a Roth conversion, let's say you do let's say a $30,000 Roth conversion, and and it's going to cost you $10,000 in taxes to do that, or maybe 8,000. I don't want you to say, oh, well, that $8,000 that I'm spending to pay the taxes on the conversion, that's spending this year. No, it's really not. You can still spend the same amount. We're going to combine getting the safe withdrawal rate right and what you can truly afford, as well as maximizing the best strategic plans for you and your family. And my contention is that you can do them both. And by the way, Social Security and how much and when to convert are not independent decisions. They actually should be coordinated, because one of the benefits of holding off on Social Security is you have a number of years of lower income, which means you can make additional Roth IRA conversions at a lower rate. And we actually have 2 hours on Roth IRA conversions coming up at 12 Eastern, which is, let's say, well, by the way, I'm in Tucson, so to me, we started at 7 in the morning. But anyway, that's coming up at, I believe that is at 12. Erica, you can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But anyway, claiming Social Security and making Roth conversions are not independent. They are interrelated, and grandparents can create tax-free growth for yourself, for your children, and for your grandchildren for years. And again, remember the survivor benefits. But here's the bottom line. Getting Social Security right is one of the most important decisions that you can make, and getting it right in addition to the Roth conversion. And we've actually quantified it. We've done it in today's dollars, but it's hundreds of thousands of dollars difference. You wouldn't think it would be that big a difference, let's say starting early versus waiting. But it is. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And by the way, this is in today's dollars. If you're interested in the exact numbers, which I'm not going to bore you with, that can be available to you. And by the way, you notice by waiting for a little while, you're worse off. But then when you're getting that additional benefit of the Roth IRA growing tax-free, as well as the additional 8% on the Social Security, that's how we end up at hundreds of thousands of dollars. So before I go on with a new topic, I'm going to see if there's any questions that we have so far. Erica, do we have any more questions?
We definitely have more questions, and I want to encourage everyone to keep putting your questions into the chat here. Jim, we did have a question from Kenneth, and I want to cover this because I believe this may be one of the sections that you took out, but I think you might be able to give an overview of it. Kenneth asks, will you cover where to take money from as you work through this? So basically a retirement withdrawal strategy, like what sources to go to first to last.
Yeah, Erica's right. When I was going through this before and practicing, I was pushing the limit on both attention span, and I just thought I would take more questions and cut some stuff out. So one of the things that I cut out was the safe withdrawal order. So I'll just go through that quickly. If you have current income, whether it's Social Security or dividends or whatever type of income you have, that is the logical asset to spend first. Then between after-tax dollars and IRA dollars, I'm interested in you spending your after-tax dollars. Again, my website and my what I've been going by for many, many years is don't pay taxes now, pay taxes later. And the reason for that is if you spend your IRA dollars first, then you have less dollars accumulating. And we actually went through an analysis showing how much better. And by the way, again, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars by spending your after-tax dollars before your IRA dollars. By the way, subject to some exception, there's a certain floor that's going to depend on your tax bracket where it might make sense to spend a little bit of IRA money just to take advantage of those lower brackets. Then for the after-tax dollars, I was more interested in you spending your dollars that have a low basis. So if you have to sell something, you're not paying a big capital gain. Because again, it's a form of paying taxes later. And then the other thing is, you might end up getting what's called a step up in basis, which means you'll never have to pay for that appreciation between the time that you bought the stock and the time that you sold the stock. By the way, talking about other predictions, so many people are taking into account the step up in basis, and they're holding off sometimes too much spending or selling some of their high basis stock, not hoping, nobody hopes they're going to die, but hoping that they were going to get the step up in basis. I think that that's going to go away. I'm not sure when. For years, I've always believed it's easier to tax dead people than alive people. So I think that that's ultimately going to go away. And I also fear the taxes are going to go up as our $39 trillion deficit continues to explode. And at some point, somebody's going to say, hey, we have to pay for some of the stuff that we're spending on. But anyway, so basically, current income after tax, just with the exception of maybe some low bracket IRA, low basis, I'm sorry, yeah, that's right, low basis stocks, then high basis stocks. Okay? We want to take one more, Erica?
Yes. Actually, if you could maybe take two.
Okay.
Okay, so one attendee asked, what if you have an investment that has a permanent guaranteed 7% growth rate? Should you still wait to collect Social Security until age 70?
Well, why not do both? If that's it, by the way, if you have something that is guaranteed 7%, I love the market because over time the market has done remarkably well, well above 7%. But you most investments don't get a 7% guaranteed rate of return. Sometimes some of the old pensions, they have what's called a guaranteed income contract, which is a GIC that does have a guaranteed rate of return. those are great things to have, and I'm not discouraging that. But um, if it came down to it that you either had to take Social Security or have to go into that 7% investment, boy, that would be a tough one. I'd have to individualize the answer to that depending on your life expectancy. Then I'm going to start playing games with, can we do much better because you have a long life expectancy. So, for example, my mom lived to age 95, and in hindsight, she did some things that were very smart, which I'm going to get to in a minute. So I hope that answers the question. And Erica, you said you wanted to do one more before we moved on.
Yes. So this one is a little bit related to that, should I hold off on Social Security if I have this? Another attendee asked, what do you live off of while making Roth conversions and waiting for Social Security?
Well, again, you live off your after tax, whatever income you have, live off your after tax dollars first, low basis, then high basis. And even if you have to go into your IRA, then Roth IRA conversions are not nearly as attractive. But I am still willing to go into the IRA rather than taking Social Security early. And we've done the numbers. By the way, we are number crunchers, by the way. And that's one of the ways that we distinguish ourselves, is even though I am presenting information here, and I don't know if you have the same slide that I have in front of me, but all this is, we have graphs, and all our all our CPAs are number crunching CPAs, right? And if you look at the two most recent books that I've had that are like 500 pages, so much of it is just, technical. I try not to get too technical, but it is based on stuff that we have run the numbers. So this isn't me off the top of my head. This is me giving you the results of all the numbers that we've run for so many years. Okay, I want to go into another thing related to safe withdrawal rates, but that people don't really take into account very often, which is, well, what if you have a paid up house? And I'm going to go back to $1 million just because the math is a little bit easier. What if you have a paid up house of $1 million? All right. Can you take that into account when you are determining your safe withdrawal rates? Well, there are people who have, probably the majority of my clients, maybe not $1 million house, but many, many, if not most, have, say, a $500,000 paid up house, and even quite a few have $1 million house. Can you take that into account when you determine how much money you can spend? And the answer is yes. So what are some of the things that you could do? You could actually borrow against that house, which, by the way, is a tax-free form of income. You could do it with a HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit. You could do a reverse mortgage, which is a much better idea than most people give it credit for. It has a bad reputation because in the old days, the fees were pretty high. But, you could get, I have clients, one in particular, I'm thinking of two in particular. They had a paid up house. It was very important for them to stay in their house. They really wanted to, but they didn't have the income that they could afford. Well, they got reverse mortgages, which was tax-free income, meaning that they could stay in their house, spend what they want to spend, and then eventually when they die, the house is sold, whatever debt is left is paid off, and the balance, which is the difference between the value of the home when it's sold after death, and the amount of money that they receive, that goes to their heirs. So that can be substantial. And here's the other thing. Not very many people actually want to do that. I actually wrote an article for Forbes. It said, do Roth conversions, and if you don't have the money to pay the tax, borrow the money from your house. So I said, let your house pay for your Roth conversions. And we ran the numbers, and we showed in a lot of cases, families were much, much better off if they did that. In reality, people didn't want to do that. They spent 30 years paying off the stupid mortgage. They're finally paid off. They don't want to do that. And if you're one of those people, great. But here's my point. You can still take that into consideration for how much money you're going to spend, even if you never intend to, just because if push came to shove, you could borrow against it. All right. Or worst came to worst, you could sell it, which I don't want you to do most likely if you're enjoying living in your house. But if you have $1 million in your house, take advantage of that. So Jonathan Clemens, who recently passed, he and I think we did 30 some, was it 34 articles together. He was the head personal finance writer for the Wall Street Journal. Phenomenal journalist, meticulous, smart, engaging. He was on my radio show, I think 6 or 7 times. Wonderful speaker, funny, just a great guy. And one of the articles that we did together was, can you borrow or can you take the equity in your home into account when you are calculating how much money you spend? And the answer that we came up with was you could take 60% of the value of your equity into account for how much money you could spend. So let's do the math. You have $1 million house, all right? Take 60%. Okay, so that's 600,000. Let's say that your safe withdrawal rate is 5%. So that's 600,000 times 5%. That is giving you an extra $30,000 a year that you could safely spend. You could probably actually spend more than that. But that is not insubstantial. That's over $2,000 a month additional. And by the way, most people don't have to mortgage their house or get a reverse mortgage. But what I don't want you to do is to live relatively frugally compared to what you can afford. And one of the ways that you can do that is taking the equity into your house. Okay, the other thing, the other section that I did take out, just because I didn't want to overwhelm people, is annuitizing. And I'll just mention for annuitizing, this is particularly for if you are interested in a higher income now. You can get more than you think by getting an immediate annuity. And annuities have bad reputations because, and there are still a lot of bad ones out there because they're high fee, et cetera. But you can get a low cost annuity, guaranteed income annuity, let's say from Vanguard or from somebody that has low fees, and get more than what you would expect in terms of income. And again, even if you never do it, taking into account that you could do it can give you additional money that you can spend. All right. So again, we're talking about, money from your portfolio. We're taking into account Social Security, even if you're not collecting it yet. We're taking into account the home equity, and if push came to shove, that you could get that you could annuitize some of your money. Okay, so let's see where we are on time. We're actually not doing too badly. Why don't we take a couple questions before we go on?
Great. The next question that we had was actually Prashant wanted to sort of disaggregate the RMD from the safe withdrawal rate. So he says, does the safe withdrawal rate include RMDs? How do RMDs impact safe withdrawal rate? So I think this is a definitional.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, so by the way, what he is talking about is the required minimum distribution on an IRA. So if you look at the minimum distribution schedule, which I don't happen to have handy, and I don't want to mess around with sharing my screen and all that, but basically the minimum required distribution rate starts at somewhere around 4%. All right, so on a $1 million portfolio, let's say that you've reached your required minimum distribution age, which depending on your year might have been 70, or if you were born later, as actually as high as 75, and it starts at somewhere at 4%. And by the way, that is based on the joint life expectancy of you and somebody deemed 10 years younger than you. And unless you are married to a spouse who is more than 10 years younger than you, and then you can lower your required minimum distribution even more. And usually the required minimum distribution is a bad thing because it's a certain amount of money that you must withdraw from your IRA and pay income taxes on it. And I guess the question is, what do you take into consideration? Well, if you have $1 million IRA, what I'm going to do is and let's say that your safe withdrawal rate is 5%. I'm still going to use the 5% safe withdrawal rate, again, that we're going to adjust for taxes, even if your minimum required distribution is lower than 5%, which it will. It'll start out lower than 5%. Then as you age and your minimum required distribution goes up, you have to take out more, which is you're paying more taxes, but I'm still going to stick with that 5%. So I'm going to stick with your safe withdrawal rate, regardless of your minimum required distribution, but I am going to take the required minimum distribution into the tax calculation because one of the early questions was, okay, if you have to, do you have to take taxes into consideration? So the answer is yes. And I'm trying to keep it simple, but in reality, that's what our number crunching CPAs do. So why don't we take the next one, if we could.
So the next question is from another live room attendee, and they ask, why not use Tom Henga's idea of buying life insurance in the amount you want to leave to your heirs and feel free to spend what you want while you are alive?
By the way, that's a totally reasonable idea. I don't know who came up with that. And frankly, that is, and to some extent, that's what I've done personally. You know, my wife and I wanted a certain guaranteed floor for Erica after we are gone, and we got second to die life insurance, which, by the way, is a better idea. It's actually a pretty decent rate of return if you compare it to, let's say, what you would get in the bond market. And unfortunately, it is guaranteed. Well, not unfortunately, because there will be a time when the policy matures, meaning you, and if it's second to die, your wife die. On the other hand, I'll tell you what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to have the only money that you're going to take into account for your kids go to life insurance. And I'll tell you why. Because I think your kids most likely would prefer to have at least a portion of the money that you have in mind for them. So let's just say, for discussion's sake, that you said, okay, I can afford $30,000 a year in my mind for my kids. Well, I guess you could say, oh, okay, well, here, kids, you can have a gift of $30,000 and you can do with what you like. Or, I guess what he's saying is, well, gee, why don't you go out and get a life insurance policy that costs $30,000 a year? And that way, after you and your spouse die, your kids get $1 million. I'm probably somewhere in between. I might say, hey, why don't we just say, here's $10,000 a year, go do whatever you want. Here's $10,000 a year, why don't you beef up your Roth IRAs and your 529 plans for your grandkids? And maybe we'll still get some insurance to have a guarantee. So just like I like to diversify a portfolio, I like to diversify the methods of gifting to your kids. But one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the safe withdrawal rate is because it does allow you to, let's say, spend more. And one of the forms of spending is giving money to your kids. And I'll tell you what I have seen historically based on a 40-year experience, which is left on their own. And even with this information, people's portfolio tends to go higher and higher and higher and higher. And then they die, and then there's a big tax, and then their kids get a lot of money in their 60s and 70s. And that is not a good plan, particularly when your kids are trying to do the best they can. And a lot of times people underestimate how important money is for their kids when they are younger, because there's a lot of kids that don't complain about it. But I guarantee you, your kids probably have, well, I can't guarantee it, but most likely your kids have more money worries than you think. Okay, why don't we take a few more? Assume we have
Great.
them.
And I just actually wanted to add that not only is the life insurance a strategy that get for gifting, a strategy that you've used, it's also a strategy that I know and I've seen you and our CPA financial planners suggest and then help our clients implement in the past. And I think that just one of the themes of today's workshop has kind of been, here are some great rules of thumb, but really the best way to do any of this kind of planning, whether it's strategic withdrawal planning, whether it's figuring out what your gifting and legacy planning strategies will be, that personalizing it and running the numbers for your specific situation is really the best way to do it. And this is a not so subtle plug for the consult, because we've actually already had a number of requests. And as Jim probably mentioned before, if you're interested in our assets under management services, we are taking those appointments right away, but there is already a wait list for people who are exclusively interested in working with us on a fee for service basis. So if you're interested in submitting a consultation request today and you haven't done so yet, I really recommend that you do it now, because we will be calling people and scheduling these appointments in the order that we receive the requests. So Justin, I think you probably already have the consult up in the chat, but if you want to put it up again, if it's not the most recent thing in the chat, and I would really recommend that people go ahead and use that. The next question is from Ray, and I think that this is also kind of a question that unfortunately the answer is going to be, you're really going to have to dig more into your numbers and run the numbers. But he says, I just turned 65 and I'm looking at reducing my traditional IRA so that I don't have to take RMDs, but still have traditional money at the 12% tax level. Is there a calculator to calculate this given my projected Social Security benefit and IRA balance with growth?
Well, there's a lot of Roth IRA calculators out there. Now, let me tell you, and I won't go into it too far because I'm going to cover this specifically when I do the Roth IRA conversion and Roth IRA workshop, which is coming up. And that is, most of these I haven't been happy with any of the calculators. You would think, us number crunching CPAs, and I think our number crunchers are at the top of their game, super sharp. They're all math oriented to start. Any one of them could have been a very good nerdy engineer. You'd think that we would have the most sophisticated whiz bang software out there, and the truth is, we haven't been happy with any of the software that we have been using, except something that is more like a spreadsheet. It's more sophisticated than Excel, and it has a lot more features unique to Roth IRAs and Roth IRA conversions. But most of the stuff out there for individuals, we or even for CPAs for that matter, we're not big fans of it. And AI is the worst because we don't know where it's getting its numbers. And there are some people who I really like, and they've done their own software, and I really wanted to use that software, but I couldn't track the numbers. I like, we're just old fuddy-duddy CPAs. We like to be able to see where every number is coming from, or else we don't trust it. Now, what I did at first is I said, oh, okay, well, we can't see every number, but if we can do it the old way manually and come to the same number that the software came up with, then maybe I'll feel a little bit better. But we didn't. It came up with different numbers. And I attract a lot of quantitative types, as you can imagine, and they go back and they want to go through our spreadsheets and stuff like that, and that is actually available because we like to know exactly where the money's coming from. What I will tell you is don't religiously go by a marginal income tax rate. So the questioner said, well, I want to check my 12%. Well, a lot of times we will go higher than your marginal tax rate, particularly for grandparents who will never spend their money. And by the way, here's a little secret. Hardly anybody will ever spend their Roth IRA. Okay. So my wife and I have a multi-million dollar Roth IRA. Guess what? I'm never going to see a nickel of that. She's never going to see a nickel of that. Our daughter's going to see that money. Does that mean that we can't take it into account for our safe withdrawal rate? No. But anyway, don't do it mechanically. If you're asking me, is there a software tool available? There was, I will tell you I'm not happy with anything. All right. Why don't we take maybe one more and then I will move on.
Great. So an attendee asked, what are the factors to consider after that first year of withdrawing, aside from market conditions and inflation, for future year withdrawals? What goes into deciding how much money to withdraw and from which source? If you have an annuity, a 401k, IRAs, etc.
All right. Well, first of all, if we're going to take Bill Bengen's actual strategy, he's not adjusting how much money we are going to withdraw based on the annual fluctuation of your portfolio. And by the way, one of the sections that I took out, because I really didn't want to overwhelm you, is I took out a video clip of Burton Malkiel. Burton Malkiel is, he is like the classic low cost index, and that's, by the way, is the kind of investments that we believe in, low cost index investments. He was, by the way, the author of A Random Walk Down Wall Street that sold 2 million books. By the way, that's just an unbelievable number of books, and that doesn't include his silver anniversary. He just actually did an update. I think it's actually the 13th edition or something like that. But he did the silver anniversary, meaning he did it 50 years after his original book came out. Anyway, I have footage of him basically saying, hold the course. I know you're seeing all this crap going on right now, with the war and inflation and oil prices. And he's saying, in the big scheme of things, that is all he's saying stay in the market. All right. And I took that out because, again, when I was doing this 3-day course on AI, which, by the way, I'm very excited about, but I was overwhelmed. That's why I took his entire section out. But he was a big thing in hold the course on investments, but don't let that impact. Don't change that every year based on a short-term fluctuation. Think about the long term. Again, the next issue is which dollars, first from current income that you have to pay income taxes on anyway, then your after-tax dollars, with maybe some lower, maybe up to a certain low marginal tax rate for the IRA, your low basis dollars, your high basis dollars first, that is money that you're not going to have to pay capital gains on, your low basis next, Then your IRA. Oh, and I think I forgot to mention, spend your Roth IRA dollars last because they're the best dollars to leave behind. Okay, how about one more question and then I'll move on.
Great. We did have another question that I think perhaps you'll address a lot more fulsomely in maybe the second, but definitely the third session, which is about sort of legacy planning. But I think this is a decent question, and you might want to address at least a portion of it. An attendee asked, should gifting to grandchildren come out of your withdrawal strategy? So I think they mean like out of retirement plans and IRAs that your safe withdrawal rate is based on, or should they be treated separately?
No, for our purposes here, gifting is the same as spending, other than the fact that you're not going to get a tax deduction. And I love gifting to grandkids. One of my favorite things to do is to give what I'll call tax leverage gifts. So let's say that you take some money that you are investing and you're paying taxes every year on those investments. And let's just say, for discussion's sake, that you have $10,000, and let's assume it's mainly after tax dollars. You're paying taxes every year on the dividends and the interest, and you give it to a grandchild or a child, and if that gift is used for something that grows income tax free. So, for example, here's a gift to a 529 plan, which is basically a tax-free college education fund. That's a great form of a gift. Let's say you have a child or a grandchild who is working, and you're using that money, and they're putting money into their Roth IRA or their Roth 401k, or they're using it for their Roth conversion. That's a great form of a tax-free gift. Of course, I also want you to, I don't want, again, it's not deferred gratification for everything. If they can use that money to help them improve the quality of their life, improve their housing, a down payment for a house, maybe paying for some of their expenses, depending on how you feel about private school, or being able to upgrade to a different neighborhood where they can maybe get into a better school, helping with a mortgage, anything like that, I think is a wonderful thing. And to me, well, I'm not selling spending. I'm here presenting ideas, but I'll just say that I have been more successful in getting people to spend money for their family than I have for getting them to spend money on themselves. Of course, I want them to do both, but I'm a big fan of gifting. And if we do it in a tax efficient manner, like 529 plans and Roth IRAs, as well as, let's call it, short and long term quality of life issues, I think that is a good thing. And some of you might be saying, well, gee, Jim, what should I do? This is some good information. And by the way, I have a lot of do-it-yourselfers, and they would rather have a root canal than pay any kind of advisor, even a nickel. And for those folks, I genuinely hope I have given some really good information. Erica's going to, when I'm done, she's going to tell you about some of the resources that we have that to me are they're just so good. And I would encourage you to take advantage of them. But for a lot of people, they're saying, well, gee, these guys really know what they're doing. And I know that if I look back on what have I actually done, well, gee, I really have spent a lot less than I could have afforded. I've gifted less to my kids and to my grandkids than I could have really afforded. And I never had anybody reminding me on an annual basis how much money I could actually spend and how much money I could actually gift. And I've maybe done some Roth conversions, but maybe I didn't really optimize Roth conversions. I have some old wills, but are they really the right thing? Gee, I don't know. Well, you could try figuring this out on your own. And for again, I have plenty of followers and people who've been reading my stuff for years and taking advantage of all the resources, which I think is fine. Or you might say, hey, why don't we put this team of experts to work on our stuff? All right. And with this retire secure consultation, and by the way, I'll make a minor adjustment of what Erica said. Do we take into account the order in which it came in? Absolutely. On the other hand, let me tell you what we won't do. If we don't think we can help you a lot, we're not here to sell people services that they don't need. And I'm at the age and stage, and we have so many people. We have so much. We have way more business than we can handle. By the way, I should mention that our CPAs are crushed. Here I am, continuing to do workshops, and are they interested in new clients, and particularly new asset under management clients? And will they actually stay evenings and work very hard to accommodate? And the answer of all that is yes. But let me tell you what they won't do. They won't take on people, and I won't take on people unless we think we can really help people. Just because you have a big portfolio. So I'll give you an example. Somebody says, okay, all I have is a $3 million IRA. I have no interest in doing a Roth conversion. And I'm really not interested in making gifts. Can you help me? Well, no, you tied our hands. You don't have a good fact pattern. That's not a good candidate for us. A better candidate is somebody that says, well, gee, how much can I really afford to spend? How much can I really afford to gift? What about the mix? How much money should I do for Roth IRA conversions? Also, I'd love to have somebody who's been an estate attorney for 40 years who actually doesn't have a law firm anymore because I sold it, but give me an objective opinion on what my estate plan is now and how it could potentially be improved. And by the way, that is, if you talk to Jen, Dom, any of us, that's what and I'm still doing it, by the way. I'm still doing these consultations myself. That will not always be the case, but I'm still doing it myself. And I'm very interested in looking at your wills and your trust and your beneficiary designations of your IRAs. And let me tell you what, almost all of them are, frankly, this is going to be a little self-serving, unless it came from the law firm that I sold to Matt Schwartz and John Montoya. Most of the estate plans are really botched. That's one of the things I always look at during these retire secure consultations. And by the way, that has huge value to have somebody that knows what they're doing, that doesn't have an ulterior motive, because I don't offer legal services. I'm not going to make any money by recommending you redo your wills or redo a portion of your wills, but that is part of what is in this retire secure consultation. And by the way, at this point, the consultations is with me, and it is with either our two, well, we actually have three senior number crunching CPAs. Steve Coman is totally booked. He's been booked for years. He's not taking any new clients. Dom and Jen are senior number crunching CPAs. They are taking clients. And then we have one who is in training. And by the way, when I say training, for the number crunching CPAs that we have, they need probably at least 7 years experience doing tax returns and strategic thinking. Then there's about a 3-year training process that they go through internally with us. Part of it is some classes that we actually subscribe to, and they have some extra letters. But some of it is just going through training with us. Believe it or not, our CPAs still meet on a weekly basis, and we do case studies and other things. And it's just a great experience. You're getting some really, really good number crunchers. And the consultation, at least right now, will have me, Dom or Jen, and then also, and by the way, when I say the junior CPA, he has 20 years experience, but he hasn't hit the 3-year mark. He's just about there, but he's still learning so much, and we're not giving him clients to handle yet, but he is assisting, and we actually have him on the calls very sharp guy. Actually, all of them are. Um, I ask a lot of questions. All right, you'll be surprised at how many questions that we ask. The other thing is we actually ask you to put together a list of assets. I do look at your wills and your trusts and your beneficiary designations. And by the way, at this point, I'm still doing that myself. All right. And you're going to hear me chime in on your estate plan. And then after we're done and we look at a lot of stuff, we actually do this highly individualized memo. We've been doing this for years. And the memo has enormous value for your estate planner, for you. It is sometimes the basis of going forward. And we do provide that for you, assuming that it makes sense for us to do business. Or even if it doesn't, we do that. We do a little bit more thoroughly for people who actually might become clients. But it is a huge value. You're getting so much great information for free, and it is a great process. And we get great compliments from these memos. And by the way, Jen and Dom and I are preparing for these consultations. We take them pretty seriously. And you're not just going to get us coming in cold. I've actually looked at your tax return, looked at your list of, and then I often dig deep into the wills, trusts, and most importantly, the beneficiary designations of retirement plans and IRAs, because frankly, most of them are, at least to some extent, botched. Roth IRA conversions are always, I won't say always, sometimes we come to the conclusion you shouldn't do them, but they should certainly be looked at. And I'll just tell you very, very briefly what in effect, our value proposition is. So for the classic assets under management, and you might have heard, okay, well, most money managers charge 1%, say on the first million, and then on the next 500,000 or the next million, then maybe it goes down to 90 basis points, or and then the charge goes down, and that's fairly standard. And that is what, if you were to work with any of the money managers that we work with, that would be more or less what you would be paying. And we work with some really good money managers that I'm not going to really go into the specifics, but I'll just say the people you are likely to potentially be referred to that work with us are excellent low-cost index or index equivalent type investors, which, by the way, is where I have my money. So you will have that element, I do have a little bit about money managers. They are very data driven. They have the best academic research available, excellent service. They do asset allocation, but also asset location, which is, for example, your Roth IRA would be invested much differently than the money that you're going to spend next year, because your Roth IRA has probably a very long time horizon, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're working with us, you're getting all that, which is probably well worth what you are paying, assuming that idea is interesting. But you also get us. You're getting us doing a lot of work up front, coming up with, well, we call it a financial master plan, but we're running numbers and optimizing Roth IRA conversions and talking about gifting and talking about estate planning. And you do all that, and you're not paying extra for us. All right. All that is included in that 1%. And again, for more than $1 million, lower than 1%. So you're getting a great money manager, and you're getting this really good strategic advice. I will look you straight in the digital eye and tell you I don't know of a better deal out there, particularly if you understood how good the people that you would be working with. We do have a financial master plan service. I don't know how long that's going to continue. It's still available. When I say it's still available, there's a long waiting list. I don't know if we're ever going to get to that, but at least at this point, that is still one of the offers. But the earliest that we could even begin to talk with you is the fourth quarter of this year. And again, I have a feeling we're never going to get to it just because we have so much work, and the CPAs prefer the assets under management because they like the relationship part of the business of seeing the same people and working with the same people year after year after year. And it's also more of a family type thing where we're taking into account, let's say, if you might have living parents, or what's going on with your kids, what's going on with your grandkids, and they far prefer that model. And frankly, so do I. And I've been doing this for a long time, and to be honest, I remember the older clients more than the more recent clients, but it does feel like family to me. It really does. We do have a $1.5 million minimum that will probably go up, but that is what Jen wanted, and Jen's one of our big number crunching CPAs, and I went along with that. And that includes a lot of work up front, which we call this financial master plan, where I'm going through your wills, trust. You will likely work with an estate attorney, not to do the documents, but to do a deeper dive than what I do. And you're getting Jen or Dawn to do some serious number crunching on your own situation. You get multiple reviews from the money manager on the investments, but you also get a review from us every year. And by the way, we're not doing like a 1 hour review. Jen actually spends 6 hours for a review. Typically 2 hours of prep, 2 hours of meeting, and 2 hours of conclusion and reports. And this is not something that you get with any firms that I know, to have somebody of Jen or Dom's caliber spending that much time every single year on your account to optimize these strategies, which in my opinion are extremely valuable. I don't want to say they're more valuable than getting the investments right, but I think that the investments is more generic. That is, you will likely come up with a similar plan among different good money managers, particularly good low-cost index or index-like type managers, but the strategies are going to be much, much different than you're going to get from us, which we can back up quantitatively. By the way, my money, my wife's money, my daughter's money, they are invested the same way that we are going to be recommending. We are true fiduciaries, which means we do put your interest ahead of our own. We take that seriously. That's not just something that we say. And if you think you are a good candidate to work with us, we would encourage you to click the link in the chat box. And then if you do qualify, and again, I'm not going to, a lot of times I'll say, no, this person, even though they have enough money, they're just not a good candidate. We're not interested. So you don't have to worry about, oh, okay, we're going to take you on as a client, even if we don't think that we can give you a lot of value. It just won't happen. But if assuming you are a good candidate, our office will coordinate. We find a mutually convenient time. If you're in Pittsburgh, I'll be back in Pittsburgh in May, so it could be in person. Most likely, we used to be mainly local. Now we're all over the country. Most likely, it'll be on Zoom. I'll also tell you, I've done thousands of consultations over the years. It used to be people used to fly in literally from all over the country. They would drive all night. And again, thousands. I've never had anybody say that it wasn't worth their time. Not even close, not even a hint. People get a huge value from these consultations. And then it's possible either I or they decide not to move forward. But the consultation is very valuable, sometimes worth thousands. Sometimes one idea might be worth hundreds of thousands. I'm not allowed to promise investment results, which I would never do anyway, but this is what I can say. We do care. We're good, honest people. We've been involved for a long time. I don't think I can help you. I'll tell you, I don't think I can help you. Um, and we believe in the strategies that we recommend. Again, my money's invested the same as yours will be, maybe different asset allocation, but basically low cost index or index light type funds. Our CPAs do work hard. They are true fiduciaries. And the way you would take advantage of it is to click the link and Justin will schedule a call.